A 10-year-old boy stood alone in a courtroom facing felony charges. "This boy has no defense," the judge laughed, ready to condemn him. But when a detective spoke 3 words, the courtroom fell silent, and everyone realized the child they judged was innocent. Lucas Martinez was 10 years old when he stood in Los Angeles juvenile court wearing clothes that didn't fit, a button-up shirt donated by a church, pants held up with a belt cinched to the last hole, shoes that squeaked because they were half a size too small. He didn't look like someone who belonged in a courtroom. He looked like someone who belonged in a 5th-grade classroom, worrying about math tests and recess, not facing felony theft charges that could change his entire life. But there he stood, small and terrified, while 50 people watched from the gallery, lawyers, court officials, law students observing for credit, and his mother Maria in the back row, crying quietly into her hands. The charges: breaking into a luxury car parked in Beverly Hills and stealing electronics worth $15,000. The evidence: security camera footage showing a boy matching Lucas's description, fingerprints on the car door, and the fact that Lucas had been arrested 3 blocks away, running, carrying a backpack. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Harold Whitmore presiding. Judge Whitmore entered, a man in his late 50s with silver hair, expensive robes, and the kind of face that suggested he'd never experienced real hardship. He took his seat, looked at the case file, then looked at Lucas with an expression somewhere between boredom and contempt. "People versus Lucas Martinez," he read. "Felony grand theft, criminal trespass, resisting arrest." He looked up. "Where's the defendant's attorney?" "Here, Your Honor." A young woman stood. Sarah Mitchell, public defender, wearing a suit that had seen better days, carrying a briefcase held together with duct tape. She couldn't have been more than 35, but she looked tired in a way that aged her. "Ms. Mitchell," Judge Whitmore said with a slight smirk. "Another pro bono case for you, I see. How noble." Several people in the gallery chuckled. Sarah's face flushed, but she said nothing. "And the prosecution?" the judge continued. "Marcus Hamilton, Your Honor." A man in a $3,000 suit stood. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect confidence. "Representing the people of California. And I should note that the victim in this case, the owner of the vehicle, is present in the courtroom." A man in the front row stood briefly. Designer clothes, expensive watch, the kind of person who lived in the hills and drove cars worth more than most people's houses. Judge Whitmore nodded approvingly. "Very good. Let's proceed with the arraignment. How does the defendant plead?" Sarah stepped forward. "Your Honor, before we enter a plea, I'd like to request—" "Ms. Mitchell," the judge interrupted. "I asked for a plea, not a request. Is your client pleading guilty or not guilty?" "Not guilty, Your Honor, but—" "Noted. Now, regarding bail—" "Your Honor," Sarah interrupted, desperation creeping into her voice. "May I approach?" Judge Whitmore sighed dramatically. "This better be quick." Sarah walked to the bench, Lucas following behind her. Up close, the judge looked even more imposing. Lucas felt like he was shrinking. "Your Honor," Sarah said quietly, "Lucas has no prior record. He's 10 years old. He lives with his mother in East LA. She works 2 jobs. They can't afford bail. If you set bail at anything more than $1,000, he'll be detained until trial. That's not my problem, Ms. Mitchell," the judge said, not bothering to lower his voice. "The defendant is accused of a serious crime. $15,000 in stolen property. If he can steal that much, his family can afford bail. He didn't steal anything, Your Honor. That's for trial to determine." Judge Whitmore cut her off. He turned to Lucas, looking down at the small boy like he was examining something distasteful. "You know what I see, son? I see another kid from the wrong side of town who thinks he can take whatever he wants from people who worked hard for what they have." Lucas's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't speak. "Your Honor, that's inappropriate," Sarah said. "He hasn't been convicted of—" "I'll decide what's appropriate in my courtroom," Judge Whitmore snapped. He looked at Marcus Hamilton. "Mr. Hamilton, what's the people's position on bail?" Marcus stood smoothly. Given the serious nature of the charges and the flight risk, the defendant was literally running when apprehended. The people request bail be set at $50,000. A gasp went through the gallery. Maria's quiet crying became audible sobbing. "50,000? Sarah's voice rose. "That's outrageous. That's—" That's what I'm going to set it at, Judge Whitmore said, bringing his gavel down. Bail is $50,000. Next case. Your Honor, please, Sarah pleaded. At least let me present evidence that— Ms. Mitchell, we're done here. Bailiff, take the defendant into custody. No, Lucas's voice finally broke through. Please, I didn't do it. Please, just listen. Judge Whitmore looked at him with cold amusement. Every defendant says they didn't do it. That's why we have trials. But let me tell you something, son. He leaned forward. This boy has no defense. The evidence is overwhelming. The security footage shows you. Your fingerprints are on that car. You were running away with stolen goods in your backpack. So you can save your protests for someone who cares. But Lucas tried to speak but couldn't find the words through his tears. Your Honor, you're traumatizing a child, Sarah said, her voice shaking with anger now. He has a right to remain silent, Judge Whitmore interrupted, which I suggest he exercise. Now, bailiff. I was protecting my sister, Lucas shouted. The courtroom went silent. Everyone stared at the 10-year-old boy who'd just confessed to something that didn't match the charges at all. Judge Whitmore raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? Lucas wiped tears from his face. I was protecting my sister, Sophia. She's 7. She was in the car. The real thief. He locked her inside when the alarm went off. I broke the window to get her out. That's why my fingerprints are there. That's why I was running. I was carrying her. Sarah looked at Lucas, then at her case file, then back at Lucas. Why didn't you tell me this? I tried, Lucas said, but nobody would listen. The police said I was lying. They said I was making up stories. They said— His voice cracked. They said nobody would believe a kid from East LA anyway. Marcus Hamilton stood up. Your Honor, this is obviously a fabrication. There's no mention of any sister in the police report. No evidence of— Because nobody looked, Lucas interrupted. They just saw me running with a backpack and decided I was guilty. Nobody asked why. Nobody asked about Sophia. They just arrested me and took me away. And where is this alleged sister now? Judge Whitmore asked skeptically. At home with our neighbor. Maria's voice came from the back of the courtroom. She stood, tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Chen, she's been watching Sophia since— She couldn't finish the sentence. Judge Whitmore looked at her with dismissive contempt. So convenient. A sister nobody can verify. A story that conveniently explains away all the evidence. Your Honor, Sarah stepped forward desperately. If you'd just allow me time to investigate, to bring Sophia here, to review the full security footage. Ms. Mitchell, Judge Whitmore interrupted coldly. I've heard enough. The evidence is clear. Security footage shows the defendant at the scene. His fingerprints are on the vehicle. He was found running with stolen goods. And now he's concocted some story about a sister to gain sympathy. It's not a story, Lucas shouted, his voice breaking. Sophia is real. She was scared. I had to save her. Enough, Judge Whitmore slammed his gavel. I will not have outbursts in my courtroom. Bailiff, if the defendant speaks again without permission, he will be held in contempt. Sarah's hands were shaking. Your Honor, please. Just give me 3 days to investigate, to find witnesses, to review all the footage, not just the clip the prosecution provided. 3 days. Marcus Hamilton stood smoothly. Your Honor, this is a transparent delay tactic. The defense has no evidence, no witnesses, no documentation of this alleged sister, just a desperate story from a defendant facing serious charges. I agree, Judge Whitmore said. Motion denied. We'll proceed to trial in— He checked his calendar. 30 days. Until then, the defendant will remain in custody. Bail stands at $50,000. No! Maria's cry echoed through the courtroom. Please, he's just a child. He didn't do anything wrong. Judge Whitmore looked at her coldly. Ma'am, if you cannot control yourself, you'll be removed from this courtroom. Your son is accused of a felony. He'll remain in juvenile detention until trial. That's my ruling. Sarah grabbed Judge Whitmore's attention one more time. Your Honor, I'm formally requesting that the court order a full review of all security camera footage from that night. Not just the 30 seconds the prosecution provided, but everything. On what grounds? The judge asked impatiently. On the grounds that there may be exculpatory evidence that— Maybe? Judge Whitmore scoffed. You're asking me to order an expensive, time-consuming review based on maybe. based on an unverified story from a 10-year-old caught red-handed. Request denied. But, Your Honor. I said denied, Ms. Mitchell. Don't make me repeat myself. In the back of the courtroom, a man in a detective's uniform had been sitting quietly, taking notes. Detective James Morgan, LAPD. He'd been assigned to observe the arraignment as part of the case file, but something about what Lucas had said bothered him. The way the boy had shouted about protecting his sister. There was genuine terror in his voice, not the calculated lie of someone trying to avoid consequences. Real, raw fear. Morgan stood up. Your Honor, may I approach? Everyone turned to look at him. Judge Whitmore frowned. You're Detective Morgan, James Morgan, LAPD. I'm the lead investigator assigned to this case after the initial arrest. And? The judge asked impatiently. I'd like to request permission to conduct a more thorough investigation. The defendant's story raises questions that... Detective, Judge Whitmore interrupted. Do you have evidence that contradicts the charges? Morgan hesitated. Not yet, Your Honor. But if I could review... Not yet, the judge repeated. So you're asking me to delay these proceedings based on a hunch? Based on reasonable doubt, Your Honor. The defendant's account, if true, would completely change. If true, Judge Whitmore said coldly. But you don't know if it's true. You're speculating. And I don't make rulings based on speculation, Detective. If you find actual evidence, bring it to me. Until then, we proceed as scheduled. Morgan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Sarah tried one more time. Your Honor, in the interest of justice... Ms. Mitchell, Judge Whitmore's voice was ice. I've made my ruling. The defendant will remain in custody. Trial is set for 30 days from now. If you want to help your client, I suggest you spend that time preparing an actual defense, instead of chasing fairy tales about imaginary sisters. He brought his gavel down with finality. We're adjourned. Bailiff, return the defendant to juvenile detention. No! Lucas lunged forward, trying to reach his mother. Mom, please, tell them about Sophia. Tell them I'm not lying. Two bailiffs grabbed him, pulling him back. Lucas! Maria tried to run to him, but court officers blocked her way. Baby, I know you're telling the truth, I know. Mom! Lucas was crying now, struggling against the bailiffs. Don't let them take me back there, please. I can't go back there. Bailiff, Judge Whitmore said tiredly. Remove the defendant, and if the mother causes any more disruptions, remove her as well. Sarah stood there, helpless, watching as they pulled Lucas toward the door that led back to detention. The 10-year-old boy who'd risked everything to save his sister was being dragged away like a criminal. This boy has no defense, she heard someone in the gallery mutter. Lucas looked back one more time as they reached the door. His eyes met his mother's across the courtroom, eyes full of betrayal, confusion, and the terrible understanding that sometimes the truth doesn't matter if nobody listens. Then he was gone. Maria collapsed into her seat, sobbing. Sarah gathered her files with shaking hands. She'd lost. Not because Lucas was guilty, but because she couldn't prove he wasn't. Because the system had already decided who he was based on where he came from. As the courtroom emptied, Marcus Hamilton approached her. Better luck next time, Mitchell, though I'd suggest actually having evidence before making wild accusations. Sarah didn't respond, just walked away. But Detective Morgan was waiting for her in the hallway. Ms. Mitchell, he said quietly. I believe him. Sarah looked at him, exhausted. Believing him doesn't help if I can't prove it. Then let's prove it, Morgan said. The judge said I need evidence before he'll listen, so I'm going to find evidence. You heard him. He denied the request to review additional footage. He denied your request, Morgan said. But he didn't order me to stop investigating. I'm still the lead detective on this case, and something about the arrest report bothers me. He pulled out his phone, showing her the initial police report. Look at this. The arresting officers noted that Lucas was carrying a backpack, yes, but they also noted he was speaking incoherently about a girl. They dismissed it as a lie, but what if it wasn't? Sarah felt a spark of hope. You think there really was a sister? I think, Morgan said carefully, that a 10-year-old boy doesn't risk everything to break into a car in Beverly Hills unless he has a very good reason. And I think the only way to find out if that reason was saving his sister is to actually look. But the judge said I need evidence, Morgan interrupted. He didn't say I couldn't look for it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to review every second of footage from that night. I'm going to find every camera within a 3-block radius, and I'm going to prove that boy was telling the truth. Why? Sarah asked. Why risk it? Your superiors aren't going to like you questioning a closed case. Morgan was quiet for a moment. Then, because years ago I arrested a kid, 15 years old. Found him with illegal substances in his backpack. He swore they weren't his, said his cousin had put them there, and he didn't know. I didn't believe him. He went to juvenile detention. He paused. Turns out, he was telling the truth. His cousin confessed 2 years later. By then, that kid's life was destroyed. Couldn't get into college. Couldn't get a job. Last I heard, he's in prison for real crimes now. And I wonder every day if he'd have ended up there if I'd believed him the first time. Sarah understood. You don't want Lucas to become that kid. I don't want to be the detective who destroyed an innocent child's life because I was too lazy to question the obvious narrative, Morgan said. So I'm going to investigate. Really investigate. Not just accept what looks true. Thank you, Sarah said quietly. Don't thank me yet, Morgan replied. I might not find anything. The boy might be lying, but if there's even a chance he's not, if there's even a chance he saved his sister and we're punishing him for it, then I have to look. He started walking toward the exit, then turned back. Ms. Mitchell, start looking for this Sophia, his sister. If she exists, if this story is real, we'll need her testimony. We'll need evidence that she was missing that night. We'll need proof. Sarah nodded. I will. But, Detective, we only have 30 days until trial. Then we'd better work fast, Morgan said. As Sarah watched him leave, she felt something she hadn't felt in years of being a public defender constantly overwhelmed by impossible cases. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, justice was still possible. Back in juvenile detention, Lucas sat in his cell, knees pulled to his chest, crying quietly. He'd told the truth. He'd tried to explain. He'd begged them to listen, and nobody had believed him. Nobody except maybe that detective and his lawyer. But what could two people do against a judge who'd already decided he was guilty? Lucas thought about Sophia, about how scared she'd been when he'd finally gotten her out of that car, how she'd clung to him, crying, as he ran through the dark streets carrying her home. He'd saved her. He'd done the right thing, and now he was here, locked up, while everyone thought he was a thief. It's not fair, he whispered to the empty cell. But fair didn't matter in a system that judged you before hearing your story. Fair didn't matter when you were 10 years old and poor and nobody believed you. Lucas lay down on the hard bed and closed his eyes, trying not to think about the 30 days stretching ahead of him before trial. 30 days of being locked up for being a hero. He just hoped someone would find the truth before it was too late. Detective James Morgan sat in his car outside the Los Angeles Police Department headquarters at 2 in the morning, staring at his laptop screen. He wasn't supposed to be here. He'd clocked out 6 hours ago. His shift was over. His captain had made it clear that the Lucas Martinez case was closed. Arraignment done, trial scheduled, move on to the next case. But Morgan couldn't move on, because every time he closed his eyes, he saw that 10-year-old boy being dragged out of the courtroom, screaming for his mother. He saw the terror in Lucas's face, the same terror he'd seen 15 years ago in another kid's eyes, the one who'd gone to prison because Morgan hadn't bothered to dig deeper. Not this time. Morgan had spent the evening calling in favors, getting access to security camera footage from businesses near the Beverly Hills location. Most owners had been reluctant until he explained he was investigating a case involving a child. Then they'd been more cooperative. Now he had 12 different camera angles from that night, 12 perspectives on what had really happened. He started with the footage the prosecution had used, the 30-second clip showing a figure near the car, the broken window, someone running away. Then he backed it up, 15 minutes earlier. At 9:47 p.m., a man appeared on screen, adult, tall, moving with purpose. He approached the luxury vehicle, looked around, then pulled something from his pocket. Lockpick tools. Professional thief, Morgan noted. Not some kid opportunistically smashing a window. The man worked for 90 seconds, got the door open, climbed inside. 2 minutes later, the car alarm went off. He'd triggered it trying to disable the ignition. Panicked, the thief grabbed electronics from the dashboard and back seat, shoved them into a backpack, and fled. But in his panic, he did something else. Morgan paused the footage, rewound it, played it again. The thief had been holding the backpack when the alarm went off. In his rush to escape, he'd thrown it on the ground outside the car to have both hands free to climb out. Then he'd grabbed it and run, but not before the car's automatic locks had engaged when the alarm triggered, and there was someone in the back seat. Morgan enhanced the image, zooming in. A small figure, a child, barely visible in the dark interior, but definitely there. Sophia, Morgan whispered. He fast-forwarded 5 minutes. The thief was gone. The alarm was still blaring. And then, Lucas appeared on screen. Morgan watched as the 10-year-old ran to the car, not with the purposeful stride of someone planning to steal, but with the desperate sprint of someone terrified. Lucas looked through the windows, pressed his hands against the glass, then grabbed a rock from the landscaping. He smashed the rear window, reached inside, pulled out a smaller child, a girl, maybe 7, crying visibly even in the grainy footage. Lucas held her, checking if she was okay. Then he noticed the backpack on the ground, the one the real thief had dropped. He grabbed it, probably thinking it might have belonged to someone who could help, or maybe just to move it out of the way. And then he ran, carrying his sister, 3 blocks, according to the arrest report, until police stopped him. Morgan leaned back, his heart pounding. Lucas had been telling the truth, every word of it. He grabbed his phone, started calling more businesses. By 4 a.m., he had footage from a convenience store 2 blocks away showing the real thief, face clearly visible, entering and buying cigarettes 20 minutes before the robbery. The timestamp on the receipt matched. By 5 a.m., Morgan had run the thief's face through the department's facial recognition system. James Caldwell, 32 years old, prior convictions for theft, burglary, possession of stolen property, currently on parole, last known address in Van Nuys. Morgan had everything he needed: video evidence, a positive ID on the real perpetrator, proof that Lucas was innocent. But when he tried to access the official case file to add his findings, his access was denied. A message popped up. Case assigned to Prosecutor M. Hamilton. Evidence submission requires supervisor approval. Morgan called his captain, got voicemail, left a message explaining what he'd found, asking for approval to submit the evidence. Then he called Sarah Mitchell. She answered on the first ring, sounding exhausted. Detective Morgan? I found it, Morgan said. All of it. The real thief. The footage showing Lucas saving his sister. Everything. He heard Sarah's breath catch. You're sure? Positive. James Caldwell, 32, career criminal. He's our guy. I have his face on camera, his timeline, everything. Lucas is innocent. Thank God, Sarah whispered. Then, can you get it to the judge? Can we get an emergency hearing? I'm trying, Morgan said. But there's a problem. The case is assigned to Marcus Hamilton, and he's blocking my access to submit evidence. I need my captain's approval, but he's not answering. So we're stuck? For now, Morgan admitted. But I'm not giving up. I'll camp outside my captain's office if I have to. We'll get this evidence in front of Judge Whitmore. How long? Sarah asked. Maybe a day, maybe 2. I don't know. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Lucas doesn't have 2 days, Detective. Do you know what juvenile detention does to a 10-year-old? Especially one who's innocent? Morgan thought about the other kid, the 15-year-old who'd gone in scared and come out broken. I know. Then we can't wait for official channels, Sarah said. We need to go around them. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, Sarah said slowly, that Judge Whitmore denied my request to investigate. But he didn't order you to stop. You're still the lead detective. You have authority to pursue leads. I do, Morgan agreed. But I can't arrest Caldwell without approval, and I can't submit evidence without clearance. No, Sarah said, but you can knock on his door and ask him questions. And if he happens to say something incriminating that I happen to witness as his potential future defense attorney doing due diligence. Morgan smiled, despite everything. You want to come with me to interview a suspect? I want to find the truth, Sarah corrected. And if the truth happens to give us leverage to force an emergency hearing, then that's justice working the way it's supposed to. This could get us both in trouble, Morgan warned. I'm a public defender, Sarah said. I'm already in trouble. What's one more complaint to the Bar Association? Morgan checked his watch. 6 a.m. Meet me at Caldwell's last known address in Van Nuys, 1 hour. I'll be there, Sarah said. Then, quieter. Thank you, Detective. for believing him. Thank you, Morgan replied, for not giving up. While Morgan and Sarah were planning their next move, Lucas was lying on a thin mattress in juvenile detention, staring at the ceiling. He hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the judge's face, heard those words, "This boy has no defense." Around him, other kids were waking up. Most of them older, 13, 14, 15. Kids who'd actually committed crimes, who belonged here in a way Lucas didn't. One of them, a tall boy, maybe 14, stopped at Lucas's cell. "You're the car thief, right? Heard you tried to rob someone in Beverly Hills." "I didn't rob anyone," Lucas said quietly. "Yeah, that's what everyone says." The older boy laughed. "But they got you on camera, little man. Security footage doesn't lie." Lucas didn't respond. What was the point? Nobody believed him anyway. A guard came by. "Martinez, you got a visitor." Lucas sat up, hope flooding through him. Maybe his mom? Maybe his lawyer with good news. But when he reached the visiting area, he found someone unexpected. Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor who'd been watching Sophia. "Lucas," she said softly, sitting across from him at the plastic table. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," Lucas lied. Mrs. Chen's eyes were sad. She'd known Lucas since he was 5 years old. She knew when he was lying. "Your mother wanted to come, but she had to work. She can't afford to miss another shift." Lucas nodded, trying not to feel hurt. He understood. They needed the money, especially now, with legal fees. "But I needed to come," Mrs. Chen continued, "because I need to tell you something about Sophia." Lucas leaned forward. "Is she okay? Is she hurt?" "Physically, she's fine," Mrs. Chen said. "But Lucas, she's not sleeping. She wakes up screaming about the car, about being locked in the dark. She keeps asking when you're coming home." Lucas's eyes filled with tears. "What does she say?" "She says her brother is a hero," Mrs. Chen whispered. "She says you saved her, and she doesn't understand why heroes go to jail." "I don't understand either," Lucas said, his voice breaking. Mrs. Chen reached across the table, putting her wrinkled hand over his. "Your lawyer, Ms. Mitchell, she came by last night. She asked me to write down everything I remember from that night, when Sophia came home with you. What she said, what she looked like." "Will it help?" Lucas asked desperately. "I don't know, sweetie, but I'm going to try. We're all going to try." She squeezed his hand. "You saved that little girl. Your sister adores you, and we're going to make sure everyone knows the truth." "But the judge already decided." "The judge," Mrs. Chen interrupted gently, "made his decision without knowing all the facts. Once he knows what really happened, things will change." "What if they don't?" Lucas whispered. "What if nobody believes me?" Mrs. Chen looked at him with fierce determination. "Then we make them believe. Your mother, me, your lawyer, that detective who stood up in court. We're not going to let you be punished for being brave." After Mrs. Chen left, Lucas was taken back to his cell. But for the first time since the arraignment, he felt something other than despair. Not hope exactly, not yet, but the possibility of hope, which, when you're 10 years old in juvenile detention, is everything. In Van Nuys, Morgan and Sarah stood outside a rundown apartment building, the kind of place where nobody asked questions and everyone minded their own business. "Third floor," Morgan said, checking his notes. "Apartment 3F. They climbed the stairs, graffiti on the walls, the smell of garbage and stale cigarettes. Morgan knocked on the door marked 3F. No answer. He knocked again, louder. "James Caldwell, LAPD. Need to ask you some questions." Silence. Then, footsteps, running, away from the door. "He's running!" Morgan shouted. Sarah stepped back as Morgan kicked the door. It took 3 tries, but it finally crashed open. Inside the apartment was a mess. Fast food containers, empty beer bottles, and in the corner, a pile of electronics. Expensive ones, still in their packaging. "Call it in," Morgan told Sarah, already moving toward the back of the apartment. He found Caldwell trying to climb out a window. Morgan grabbed him, pulled him back inside, pushed him against the wall. "James Caldwell, you're under arrest for grand theft, burglary, and child endangerment." "I didn't endanger no child," Caldwell shouted. "I don't even know what you're talking about." "The car in Beverly Hills," Morgan said coldly. 2 weeks ago, you broke into a vehicle, stole electronics, triggered the alarm. And you locked a 7-year-old girl inside. Caldwell's face went pale.
I didn't know she was in there. The alarm went off and I just ran, man. I didn't know.
But you knew afterward, Sarah said from the doorway. You had to have seen the news, seen that a child was arrested for your crime, and you said nothing. Caldwell looked between them. I want a lawyer. You'll get one, Morgan said, cuffing him. Right after I submit my report about how you let an innocent 10-year-old spend 2 weeks in detention rather than confess to your crime. He's in detention. Caldwell looked genuinely shocked. The kid who broke the window? I heard someone got arrested, but I figured they'd let him go once they realized. They didn't realize, Sarah said coldly. Because you didn't come forward. A child is in jail because you're a coward. Caldwell slumped against the wall, the fight going out of him. I was on parole. I'd go back to prison. I needed the money. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But it did happen, Morgan said. And now you're going to make it right. You're going to confess. Everything. And you're going to do it in front of Judge Whitmore. And if I don't, then I charge you with child endangerment on top of everything else, Morgan said. Your choice. Confess and maybe get some leniency, or fight it and face every charge I can think of. Caldwell looked at the floor. Then, quietly, I'll confess, but that kid, he really saved her. The little girl, he's her brother, Sarah said. And yes, he saved her. Carried her 3 blocks to safety while you ran away like a coward. Caldwell nodded slowly. Then yeah, I'll confess. That kid shouldn't be in jail. I should. Morgan called it in. Within an hour, uniformed officers arrived to process the scene and take Caldwell into custody. As they led him away, Morgan turned to Sarah. We did it. We have our confession. And with the footage I found, we have everything we need. Sarah allowed herself a smile. Now we just need to get it in front of Judge Whitmore. Emergency hearing, Morgan said. I'll call my captain. He's probably awake by now. You file the motion. It's going to take time, Sarah warned. Even with a confession, we need to go through channels. File paperwork. Get it on the judge's docket. How long? Maybe 3 days. Maybe 4. Morgan thought about Lucas in that cell. About Sophia having nightmares. About Mrs. Chen's statement, and Maria working 2 jobs to pay for a lawyer to defend a child who shouldn't need defending. We'll make it 2, he said. I'll make sure of it. And as the sun rose over Los Angeles, for the first time since this nightmare began, justice wasn't just possible. It was inevitable. 2 days after Detective Morgan arrested James Caldwell, Sarah Mitchell stood outside Judge Whitmore's chambers, holding a motion for an emergency hearing. She'd been waiting for 3 hours. Ms. Mitchell, the judge's clerk said for the 4th time, His Honor is very busy. He'll see you when he has time. A child is in detention for a crime he didn't commit, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. Every hour that passes is another hour of injustice. The clerk's expression softened slightly. I understand, but there are procedures. Ms. Mitchell. Sarah turned. Marcus Hamilton stood behind her, perfectly dressed as always, holding his own stack of files. Mr. Hamilton, Sarah said coldly, I heard you're trying to get an emergency hearing on the Martinez case. Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. Based on what? A confession from a career criminal trying to cut a deal? Based on video evidence showing Lucas Martinez is innocent, Sarah countered. Evidence your office should have reviewed before charging a 10-year-old. We reviewed all available evidence at the time of arrest, Marcus said smoothly. If new evidence has emerged, it can be presented at trial. That's how the system works. The system, Sarah said, her voice rising, put an innocent child in detention. The system failed him, and you're blocking every attempt to fix that failure. I'm following procedure, Marcus replied, which is more than I can say for you and Detective Morgan. Conducting unauthorized interviews, accessing case files without clearance. You're lucky I haven't reported you both for misconduct. Sarah stepped closer. You know he's innocent. You've seen Morgan's report. You've seen Caldwell's confession. And you're still fighting this because you don't want to admit your office made a mistake. I don't admit mistakes, Marcus said quietly, because I don't make them. That boy was found with stolen property. He had opportunity and means. If Caldwell wants to claim responsibility now, that's fine. We can charge them both. Charge them both? Sarah stared at him. Lucas is 10 years old. He saved his sister. And you want to charge him as an accomplice? I want, Marcus said, to ensure justice is properly served. Not rushed through because a public defender has a bleeding heart for every criminal who claims innocence. Before Sarah could respond, Judge Whitmore's door opened. Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Hamilton. The clerk gestured. His Honor will see you now. They entered the judge's chambers. Judge Whitmore sat behind his desk, looking tired and irritated. This better be important, he said without preamble. I have a full docket, and you're both taking up time I don't have. Sarah placed her motion on his desk. Your Honor, I'm requesting an emergency hearing for Lucas Martinez. We have new evidence that completely exonerates him. Judge Whitmore picked up the motion, skimmed it. Detective Morgan's report, security footage, a confession from, he paused, James Caldwell, the alleged real perpetrator. Not alleged, Your Honor, Sarah said. Confirmed. Morgan has 12 different camera angles showing Caldwell committing the theft. We have facial recognition confirmation. We have Caldwell in custody with stolen goods in his apartment. And we have his full confession. Judge Whitmore looked at Marcus. Mr. Hamilton, your position? The prosecution believes this evidence should be evaluated at trial, Your Honor, not in some rushed emergency hearing that circumvents proper procedure. A child is in detention, Sarah said. Every day we delay is another day of trauma for him and his family. Ms. Mitchell, Judge Whitmore said, his voice sharp. I understand your passion, but Mr. Hamilton has a point. We have procedures for a reason. If I grant emergency hearings every time new evidence emerges, the entire system collapses. But Your Honor, however, Judge Whitmore continued, holding up his hand, I'm willing to review the evidence myself. Give me everything you have. Morgan's full report, the video footage, Caldwell's confession. I'll examine it tonight and make a decision in the morning. It wasn't the immediate hearing Sarah wanted, but it was something. Thank you, Your Honor, she said. Don't thank me yet, Judge Whitmore replied. If the evidence isn't as conclusive as you claim, we proceed to trial as scheduled. Understood? Understood. As Sarah left the chambers, Marcus caught up with her in the hallway. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. The only mistake, Sarah replied, was charging Lucas in the first place. You think this is about him? Marcus's voice dropped. This is about you. About your need to be the hero who saves the innocent child. But what happens when you're wrong? When that boy really did steal and you've wasted the court's time chasing fairy tales? Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him. I've watched the footage, Marcus, all of it. I've seen Lucas break that window to save his sister. I've seen Caldwell commit the actual theft. I know the truth. The question is, why are you so determined to ignore it? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, do you know how many cases I prosecute every year? Hundreds. And 90% of them are guilty. So yes, maybe I've learned to assume guilt. Maybe I've learned that sob stories are usually just that, stories. But that assumption keeps criminals off the streets and puts innocent children in detention, Sarah said. One mistake, Marcus said, in hundreds of cases. That's not a bad record. Tell that to Lucas, Sarah replied, walking away. That evening, Judge Whitmore sat in his study at home, laptop open, watching the security footage for the third time. He saw Caldwell break into the car, saw the alarm trigger, saw the thief panic and run, leaving a child locked inside. And then he saw Lucas. The boy didn't move like a thief. He moved like someone terrified. Running to the car, looking through the windows, his body language screaming desperation. The window breaking. The small figure being pulled out, Sophia, Whitmore assumed. Lucas holding her, checking if she was okay. Then running. Not away from a crime, but toward safety. Carrying his sister. Judge Whitmore paused the video, leaned back in his chair. He'd been a judge for 23 years. He'd developed instincts about guilt and innocence, about truth and lies. And watching this footage, his instincts were screaming that he'd made a terrible mistake. But admitting that mistake meant admitting he'd traumatized an innocent child, that he'd let his prejudices about poverty, about neighborhoods, about who belonged in his courtroom, cloud his judgment. His phone rang. His wife. Harold, are you coming to bed? Soon, he said. I'm reviewing a case. It's midnight. Can it wait? Judge Whitmore looked at the frozen image on his screen. Lucas Martinez, 10 years old, carrying his sister to safety. "No," he said quietly. "It can't wait." In juvenile detention, Lucas woke up from another nightmare. Sophia locked in the car, the alarm blaring, his hands bleeding from breaking the window. The police lights, the handcuffs. "You okay, kid?" A guard stood outside his cell. Lucas nodded, not trusting his voice. "Your lawyer called earlier," the guard said. "She wanted you to know she's fighting for you. Said to hang in there." "When?" Lucas asked. "When will I get out?" The guard's expression was sympathetic. "I don't know, son, but I hope it's soon. You don't belong here." After the guard left, Lucas lay back down, staring at the ceiling. Mrs. Chen had told him to have hope. His mother had told him to be strong. Sarah had promised to fight for him. But hope was hard when you were 10 years old and every adult with power had already decided you were guilty. The next morning, Sarah's phone rang at 6 a.m. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Judge Whitmore's clerk. His Honor would like to see you in his chambers at 8 a.m. sharp. Bring your client's mother." Sarah's heart raced. Does he want an emergency hearing?" "I can't say. Just be there at 8. Sarah immediately called Maria Martinez, then Detective Morgan, then Mrs. Chen to watch Sophia. At 8 a.m. they stood in Judge Whitmore's chambers. The judge looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red. His normally immaculate appearance was disheveled. "I've reviewed everything," he said without greeting. "The footage, Morgan's report, Caldwell's confession." He paused. "And I've made a decision." Sarah held her breath. "I'm scheduling an emergency hearing for this afternoon at 2 p.m., Judge Whitmore said. "I want Lucas Martinez brought from detention. I want James Caldwell brought from county jail. And I want the full footage shown in open court." Maria's hand went to her mouth. "Your Honor," Sarah said, barely able to speak. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Judge Whitmore replied, his voice heavy. "I should have done this from the beginning. I should have listened. He stopped himself. "Just have your client ready. And Ms. Mitchell, you were right, about everything." At 2 p.m. the courtroom was packed. Word had spread about the emergency hearing. Local news cameras waited outside. Law students filled the gallery. And Lucas Martinez, in clothes his mother had brought, stood next to Sarah Mitchell, watching as James Caldwell was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit. Judge Whitmore entered. "All rise." Everyone stood. "We're here," the judge began, "because I made a mistake. A serious, inexcusable mistake. And today, we're going to correct it." He nodded to his clerk, who started the security footage on the courtroom screen. Everyone watched in silence as the truth played out. Caldwell stealing, the alarm, Sophia trapped, Lucas saving her. When it ended, the courtroom was absolutely silent. Judge Whitmore looked at Lucas. "Son, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you justice. And today, you're going to get it." The courtroom lights dimmed as the security footage began playing on the large screen. Every eye in the room was fixed on the video. Law students, news reporters who'd snuck in, Maria Martinez, gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles were white, and Lucas, watching the night that had destroyed his life replay in front of dozens of strangers. At 9:47 p.m., James Caldwell appeared on screen. The timestamp was clear, the image quality was perfect, and there was no mistaking what happened next. Caldwell approached the luxury vehicle with lockpick tools, worked on the door for 90 seconds, climbed inside. 2 minutes later, the alarm. In the gallery, people leaned forward. This wasn't the story they'd been told. This wasn't a child breaking into a car. This was a grown man, a professional. The alarm blared silently on the screen. Caldwell panicked, grabbed electronics, threw his backpack on the ground outside to climb out faster, then grabbed it and ran. But the camera caught something else, something the prosecutor's 30-second clip had conveniently cut out. In the back seat, barely visible in the darkness, a small figure, a child. Maria's sob echoed through the courtroom. 5 minutes passed on the timestamp. The car sat there, alarm still flashing. A 7-year-old locked inside. Then Lucas appeared. Judge Whitmore watched the boy on screen, watched him run to the car with desperate speed, press his hands against the windows, look around frantically for help that wasn't coming. "He's terrified," someone in the gallery whispered. Lucas grabbed a rock from the landscaping, smashed the rear window, reached inside, pulled out Sophia, And even in grainy security footage, her fear was visible. The way she clung to her brother, the way he held her, checking if she was hurt. Then Lucas noticed the backpack on the ground, picked it up, probably thinking it belonged to someone who could help, and ran, not away from the scene like a criminal, toward home, carrying his sister, protecting her. The footage ended. The courtroom was silent. Judge Whitmore turned to James Caldwell, who sat in the defendant's chair wearing handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit. "Mr. Caldwell," the judge said, his voice cold, "you've agreed to testify. Tell this court what happened that night." Caldwell looked at the floor. "I was trying to steal from the car. I've done it before. Target nice neighborhoods, luxury vehicles, quick in and out. But the alarm went off and I panicked." "And the child in the back seat?" Judge Whitmore pressed. "Did you know she was there?" Caldwell was quiet for a moment. "No, not until I was already running. I looked back and saw the kid, Lucas, breaking the window. And I realized I must have locked someone inside when the alarm triggered the automatic locks." "You locked a 7-year-old girl in a car and ran away," Sarah said from the defense table. "I know," Caldwell said quietly. "I know what I did. And when I heard a kid got arrested for it, I should have come forward. But I was on parole, I was scared. And I'm a coward." He looked up at Lucas. "I'm sorry. You shouldn't have spent 1 second in jail for what I did. You're the hero. I'm the criminal." Marcus Hamilton stood abruptly. "Your Honor, I'd like to—" "Sit down, Mr. Hamilton," Judge Whitmore said sharply. "You'll get your turn to speak." Marcus sat, his face flushed. Judge Whitmore turned to Lucas. "Son, would you like to say anything? You don't have to. But this is your chance." Lucas stood slowly. Sarah put a supportive hand on his shoulder. "I just wanted to save my sister," Lucas said, his voice small but steady. "I heard her crying inside the car. I didn't care about stealing. I didn't even think about it. I just knew she was scared and I had to get her out." He looked at Caldwell. "And when the police stopped me, I tried to explain. But they didn't listen. They saw me running with the backpack and decided I was guilty. Nobody asked about Sophia. Nobody asked why I broke the window. They just arrested me." Lucas's voice started shaking. "And when I got to court, the judge," he glanced at Whitmore, "he said I had no defense, that kids like me from my neighborhood probably steal things. He didn't even want to hear my story." Judge Whitmore's expression was pained. "But I'm not a thief," Lucas continued. "I'm just a kid who loves his sister, and I'd do it again. I'd break that window 100 times if it meant keeping her safe." He sat down. Maria was crying openly now. Judge Whitmore was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his voice carried the weight of genuine remorse. "Lucas Martinez," he began, "I owe you an apology, not just as a judge but as a human being. I looked at you and saw your neighborhood, your clothes, your circumstances, and I let those things convince me you were guilty before hearing the evidence." He paused. "I've been a judge for 23 years. I've prided myself on fairness, on following the law. But the truth is, I let my prejudices blind me. I saw a poor child and assumed the worst. I dismissed your story as a lie before investigating if it was true." Several law students in the gallery were taking notes rapidly. "You spent days in juvenile detention for being a hero," Judge Whitmore continued. "Your mother worked extra shifts to pay for a lawyer you shouldn't have needed. Your sister had nightmares about the night you saved her. And all of that happened because I was too arrogant to question the obvious narrative." He looked at Marcus Hamilton. "Mr. Hamilton, do you have anything to say?" Marcus stood stiffly. "Your Honor, the prosecution, we acted on the information available at the time. The evidence seemed clear." "The evidence," Sarah interrupted, standing, "was incomplete. You had a 30-second clip and decided it was enough to charge a 10-year-old with a felony. You didn't request additional footage. You didn't investigate his story about his sister. You saw an easy conviction and took it." "Ms. Mitchell," Marcus started. "And when Detective Morgan found evidence proving Lucas's innocence," Sarah continued, her voice rising, "you blocked him. You delayed. You suggested charging both Lucas and Caldwell rather than admit your office made a mistake. You cared more about your conviction rate than about justice." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Your Honor, I object to—" "Your objection is noted and overruled," Judge Whitmore said. "Ms. Mitchell is right. The prosecution failed in its duty to seek justice, not just convictions. And I failed in my duty to ensure fairness. He brought his gavel down once, firmly. All charges against Lucas Martinez are dismissed with prejudice. He is free to go immediately. The record will show that he committed no crime, that he was, in fact, performing an act of heroism that this court failed to recognize. The gallery erupted in applause. Maria rushed forward, grabbing Lucas and holding him like she'd never let go. Judge Whitmore wasn't finished. Furthermore, I'm ordering a review of all juvenile cases prosecuted by Mr. Hamilton's office in the past 2 years. If this happened to Lucas Martinez, it may have happened to others. And I'm recommending that Mr. Hamilton face disciplinary action for his handling of this case. Marcus's face went pale. Your Honor, that's justice, Mr. Hamilton, which you seem to have forgotten is the point of our profession. As the courtroom slowly emptied, Detective Morgan approached Lucas and Maria. Hey, kid, Morgan said, kneeling down to Lucas's level. I'm sorry it took so long. I should have found that evidence faster. You believed me, Lucas said simply. Nobody else did. But you did. Morgan's eyes were wet. You're a brave kid. Your dad would be proud. Lucas looked confused. My dad? Yeah, Morgan said. Any father would be proud to have a son like you. Someone who'd risk everything to save his sister. Maria put her hand on Morgan's shoulder. Thank you, Detective, for not giving up, for caring enough to find the truth. That's my job, Morgan said. I just wish I'd done it sooner. Outside the courthouse, news cameras were waiting. Reporters shouted questions as Lucas and Maria emerged. Lucas, how do you feel about the charges being dismissed? Did the judge apologize? What's next for your family? Sarah stepped forward, shielding them. The Martinez family has been through enough. They deserve privacy to heal. But I will say this, what happened to Lucas happens to poor families every day. Children are assumed guilty based on where they live, what they wear, how much money their parents have. Lucas was lucky. Detective Morgan cared enough to investigate. Judge Whitmore had the courage to admit his mistake. But how many other kids aren't so lucky? She looked directly at the cameras. Our justice system is supposed to be blind to wealth and status, but it's not. And until we fix that, Lucas Martinez won't be the last innocent child to suffer. That evening, Lucas sat in his own bedroom, not a detention cell, with Sophia curled up next to him. Lucas, Sophia whispered, are you really not going back to jail? Really not, Lucas promised. The judge said I'm free. Because you saved me. Because I saved you, Lucas confirmed. And because people finally listened. Sophia was quiet for a moment. I was so scared that night, in the car. But then you came, and I knew I'd be okay, because you always keep me safe. Lucas hugged his little sister. Always. Maria stood in the doorway, watching her children together. For the first time in weeks, both of them looked peaceful. Justice had taken too long. The system had failed them in every possible way. But in the end, the truth had won. And sometimes, that had to be enough. 1 year later, Lucas Martinez stood in front of 200 law students at UCLA, wearing a suit that actually fit him, no longer the terrified 10-year-old in donated clothes. He was 11 now, taller, still shy but with a quiet confidence that came from surviving something that would have broken most adults. My name is Lucas Martinez, he began, his voice steady despite his nervousness. And a year ago, I was arrested for a crime I didn't commit. The auditorium was silent. Every student knew his story. It had become required reading in criminal justice courses across California. The boy who'd been judged before being heard. The case that changed everything. I broke a car window, Lucas continued. Cut my hands on the glass. Ran 3 blocks carrying my sister. And I was arrested for theft because the system looked at where I came from and decided I must be guilty. He paused, looking out at the faces watching him. But this isn't a story about me being a victim. It's a story about the people who refuse to let injustice win. In the front row, Sarah Mitchell wiped her eyes. Next to her sat Detective Morgan, in uniform, and Judge Harold Whitmore, who'd taken a temporary leave from the bench to teach a course on judicial reform. Detective Morgan could have accepted the obvious answer, Lucas said. The footage, the fingerprints, the stolen goods in my backpack. But he didn't. He investigated. He stayed up all night reviewing camera footage because he believed that truth was more important than convenience. Morgan shifted uncomfortably, never comfortable with praise. Ms. Mitchell could have given up when the judge denied her motions, when the prosecutor blocked her at every turn, when the system said there was no hope. But she didn't. She fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. Sarah smiled through tears. And Judge Whitmore. Lucas looked directly at the man who'd once terrified him. He could have stayed defensive when the evidence proved he was wrong. He could have found excuses. But instead, he did something harder. He admitted his mistake. He apologized. And then he changed. Judge Whitmore met Lucas's eyes and nodded, the weight of that day still visible on his face. In the year since my case, Lucas continued, Judge Whitmore has reviewed over 300 cases where people claimed innocence but were convicted on circumstantial evidence. He's found 17 wrongful convictions. 17 people who are free now because one judge decided to listen. The students began to applaud, but Lucas held up his hand. And Mr. Hamilton, the prosecutor who fought against me, he's not here today. He was removed from his position after an investigation found 42 cases where he'd withheld evidence or rushed to judgment. Some of those people are getting new trials. Some are already free. Lucas took a breath. I'm not telling you this to make anyone a hero or a villain. I'm telling you because you're going to be lawyers, judges, police officers. You're going to have power over people's lives, and I want you to remember something. He looked around the auditorium. The system isn't broken because bad people run it. It's broken because good people stop questioning it. Because it's easier to assume guilt than to investigate innocence. Because poverty looks like criminality if you're not paying attention. His voice grew stronger. When I stood in that courtroom, Judge Whitmore looked at my donated clothes and decided I was a criminal. Not because he was evil, but because he'd stopped seeing people as individuals. He saw a category, a statistic, a case number. Lucas pulled a piece of paper from his pocket, worn from being folded and unfolded many times. This is the commendation Judge Whitmore gave me. It says I showed civic heroism by saving my sister. But here's what it should say, that a 10-year-old shouldn't need to be heroic just to be believed. That children shouldn't have to prove their innocence by suffering first. He looked at Judge Whitmore. No offense, Your Honor. Whitmore smiled sadly. None taken. You're absolutely right. Lucas folded the paper carefully. I keep this, not because I'm proud of it, but because I never want to forget what it felt like to be judged without being heard. And I hope none of you forget either. He was about to step down when a student raised her hand. Yes, Lucas said. How did you forgive them? The student asked. The judge, the system, everyone who failed you? How did you let go of that anger? Lucas was quiet for a moment. I didn't let go of the anger, he said honestly. I still get angry sometimes. When I think about the 2 weeks in detention, when Sophia wakes up from nightmares about being locked in that car, when I remember how my mom cried in the courtroom. He paused. But I learned something from my mom. She always says that forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about refusing to let what happened define your future. Judge Whitmore made a terrible mistake, but he owned it. He changed. He's helping other people now. If I stayed angry, I'd be punishing him for getting better, and that doesn't help anyone. Another student spoke up. But what about justice? Don't you deserve compensation? An apology isn't enough. You're right, Lucas said. An apology isn't enough. That's why Judge Whitmore helped my mom sue the city. We got a settlement that paid off our debts and set up a college fund for me and Sophia. That's why Detective Morgan got promoted to head of a new unit that reviews questionable arrests. That's why Ms. Mitchell now trains public defenders on how to fight for their clients even when the system pushes back. He smiled slightly. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about making sure the mistake doesn't happen again. And I think we're doing that. Sarah stood up. If I may add something, Lucas and his family could have taken their settlement and disappeared. Instead, they've spent the last year advocating for juvenile justice reform. Lucas has spoken at 6 universities, 3 police training academies, and testified before the state legislature about bail reform. She looked at Lucas with pride. He's 11 years old and he's changing the system that failed him. That's what real heroism looks like. After the presentation, students lined up to ask questions, to thank Lucas, to tell him their own stories of injustice witnessed or experienced. One young woman approached with tears in her eyes. My brother was arrested last year. He's 14. They set bail so high our family couldn't afford it, and he spent 3 months in detention, before the charges were dropped. If it wasn't for your case making people question these practices, she couldn't finish. Lucas reached out and squeezed her hand. Is he okay now? He is, thanks to people like you speaking up. Not me, Lucas said. Thanks to people like Detective Morgan and Ms. Mitchell and Judge Whitmore who actually did something. I just told the truth. They made people listen. As the crowd thinned, Judge Whitmore approached Lucas. That was powerful, he said. Thank you for what you said about second chances. You earned it, Lucas replied, by actually changing. Whitmore nodded. I want you to know, I think about you every day. Every time I'm about to make a judgment call, I stop and ask myself, am I seeing this person, or am I seeing my assumptions? Am I listening, or am I deciding before the evidence is in? That's all anyone can do, Lucas said. Try to be better than yesterday. Wise words from someone so young, Whitmore said. My mom's words, Lucas corrected. I'm just smart enough to listen to her. Outside, Maria waited with Sophia, who was now 8, and still insisted on holding Lucas's hand whenever they were together. How did it go? Maria asked. Good, Lucas said. They listened. Of course they listened, Sophia said. You're famous. You saved me, and now you save other people by talking. Lucas laughed. I'm not famous. I'm just a kid who had something happen to him. You're my famous brother, Sophia insisted, and you're the bravest person in the world. As they walked to their car, a modest used vehicle bought with settlement money, nothing fancy but reliable, Lucas thought about everything that had changed in a year. They'd moved to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. Maria had been able to cut back to one job. Sophia's nightmares had decreased from nightly to occasional. And Lucas had discovered something unexpected, that his worst experience had given him a voice that people wanted to hear. He didn't want to be defined by those 2 weeks in detention. But if his story could prevent another child from experiencing the same injustice, then maybe it had been worth it. Not worth it in the sense that he'd choose it again. He wouldn't wish that terror on anyone. But worth it in the sense that suffering can become purpose if you let it. Lucas, Sophia tugged on his hand. When I grow up, I want to be like you. A kid who got arrested, Lucas teased. No, Sophia said seriously. Someone who saves people. You saved me from the car. And now you save other kids by making sure judges and police treat them fair. That's what I want to do. Lucas looked at his little sister, this girl he'd risked everything to protect, and felt something shift in his chest. He'd broken that window because he loved her, because protecting her was more important than his own safety. And now, a year later, she wanted to protect others the same way. That, Lucas thought, was how change happened. Not through laws or policies alone, though those mattered, but through people deciding that someone else's suffering mattered enough to do something about it. Then that's what you'll do, Lucas said, squeezing her hand. We'll do it together. As they drove home through Los Angeles, this city that had once seemed so determined to condemn him, Lucas understood something his mother had been trying to teach him all along. The world wasn't fair. The system made mistakes. People judged based on appearances and assumptions. But the world could get better. Systems could change. People could learn, as long as someone cared enough to speak up. As long as someone refused to accept injustice as inevitable. As long as truth mattered more than convenience. And sometimes all it took was one 10-year-old boy breaking a window to save his sister, and refusing to let anyone tell him that love was a crime. That was the real defense. Not lawyers or evidence or procedures, but the unshakable knowledge that doing the right thing, even when it's terrifying, even when no one believes you, even when the whole world says you're wrong, that will always, eventually, be enough.